War is usually remembered through gunfire, explosions, and battlefield heroics. But sometimes the most revealing moments of war happen far from the front lines, quiet, strange moments that expose what soldiers truly believe, fear, and hope for. In the winter of 1944, in the middle of the Arizona desert, one German prisoner of war made a decision so unexpected that even his captors struggled to understand it. He had escaped captivity, crossed miles of desert, cheated death more than once, and then voluntarily returned. Not because of guards. Not because of patrols. But because of a Christmas menu. At 2:47 p.m. on December 23, 1944, Unteroffizier Werner Krauss stood at the outer gate of Camp Papago Park near Phoenix, Arizona. His uniform was caked with dried mud. His body trembled uncontrollably, despite the mild 68-degree winter air. For 6 days he had been free. 6 days since crawling through a tunnel nearly 180 feet long. 6 days since stepping into the Sonoran Desert. 6 days since walking more than 40 miles under an unforgiving sky. Twice he had come close to dying of thirst. Now he was surrendering. The reason was posted on a bulletin board just inside the fence. A Christmas menu. Roast turkey with stuffing. Mashed potatoes. 3 kinds of pie. Werner Krauss had not seen food like that since 1941. Back in the camp, his commanding officer had warned him that such menus were American lies, carefully designed propaganda meant to soften German resolve. Guards had said the same about the photographs in the camp library, especially the images of the Grand Canyon. Hollywood tricks, they claimed. Fake landscapes created to make America look larger, richer, more powerful than it truly was. Werner had believed all of it. For 4 months he had helped dig the escape tunnel. On the night of December 16th, he slipped into the darkness with 24 other prisoners. And now, 6 days later, he stood asking to be let back inside because he could not stop thinking about pie. The guard who processed his return was Corporal James Mitchell, a native of Tucson. Mitchell had been stationed at Camp Papago since it opened in May 1943. He had processed 311 German prisoners upon their arrival. He had watched them form a 32-piece orchestra. He had confiscated contraband from their volleyball court more times than he could remember. And he had heard every excuse imaginable from men who tried and failed to escape. But this was a first. Mitchell asked Krauss to repeat himself. Carefully choosing his words, Werner explained that he had seen the Christmas menu. He needed to know if the turkey was real. Mitchell confirmed that it was. Werner asked about the pie. Apple, pumpkin, and pecan, Mitchell replied. Werner sank to the ground and buried his face in his hands. Mitchell called for the camp commander. By December 1944, Camp Papago Park held nearly 3,700 German prisoners of war. Most had been captured in North Africa, veterans of Rommel's Afrika Korps who had fought across Libya, Tunisia, and Egypt. Between 1942 and 1943, they surrendered to British and American forces, were shipped across the Atlantic, and dispersed among dozens of POW camps throughout the United States. Arizona received more prisoners than most states. Its climate resembled North Africa, and its farms and orchards needed labor. Under the Geneva Convention, prisoners could not be forced to work, but many volunteered out of sheer boredom. They earned 80 cents an hour in camp-issued scrip, usable at the canteen for beer, cigarettes, candy bars, and magazines. To many of the prisoners, none of it seemed real. Lieutenant Jürgen Wartenberg arrived at Camp Papago in September 1943. Before the war, he had been a U-boat officer, commanding submarines in the Atlantic. Captured by the British in 1941 after his boat was depth-charged off Iceland, he spent 2 years in British camps before being transferred through Canada to the United States. He arrived expecting punishment, strict discipline, and hunger. Instead, he found libraries, classrooms, a theater, and meals that included meat. Wartenberg did not trust it. Trained to detect deception, he concluded that the Americans were waging psychological warfare. The abundance was artificial. The food was suspicious. The newspapers were staged. The films shown in the camp theater were nothing but Hollywood propaganda designed to project American power and prosperity. He organized resistance, not violent but intellectual. A secret committee of senior officers met weekly, analyzing every book, newspaper, photograph, and film for signs of manipulation. In November 1944, the committee reviewed photographs of the Grand Canyon placed in the camp library. The images showed a vast chasm, red and orange rock plunging more than a mile deep, a river winding far below. The committee dismissed them immediately. No natural formation could be that large. The scale defied reason. The conclusion was obvious. The photographs were fake, produced on a Hollywood set to intimidate German prisoners. Werner Krauss attended 3 of these meetings before the escape. He was 24 years old, drafted into the Wehrmacht in 1940. He had fought in France, then North Africa, before being captured by British forces near El Alamein in November 1942. After months in a camp in Egypt, he arrived in the United States in mid-1943. He accepted Wartenberg's theories because the alternative was unbearable. If the food was real, if the abundance was genuine, then Germany was losing a war against an enemy whose resources were beyond imagination. It was easier to believe America was lying. The escape plan took shape in August 1944. Wartenberg proposed it during a committee meeting. Dig a tunnel. Escape at night. Split into small groups. Reach Mexico just 120 miles south. From there, German sympathizers would help arrange passage home. 25 men volunteered. Werner was among them. They dug at night for 4 months, entering through a shower drain in Compound 1A. The excavated clay was mixed with sand and spread across the camp's volleyball court. Guards inspected the area twice and noticed nothing. By December 15, the tunnel stretched 178 feet, 15 feet beyond the fence. The escape began on December 16 under moonless skies. At 10:30 p.m. The first man crawled into the narrow tunnel, 2 feet high, 2 feet wide. It took 3 hours for all 25 men to emerge into the desert. They split up. 3 headed west with a collapsible boat, believing they could float down rivers to the Gulf of California. The others moved south toward Mexico in pairs or trios. Werner paired with Klaus Becker. By dawn their map betrayed them. Every creek they found was bone dry. By noon their canteens were empty. Arizona winter was not cold, it was deceptively warm. Their lips cracked. Their mouths tasted of metal. By sunset they collapsed beside a highway, 19 hours into their escape, 6 without water, waiting for a car. Werner Krauss would not make it much farther. And soon the promise of turkey and pie would prove stronger than freedom itself. At 6:47 p.m., a pickup truck appeared on the horizon. Werner Krauss and Klaus Becker staggered to their feet and waved weakly. The truck slowed, then stopped. Behind the wheel was Miguel Hernandez, a Mexican farm worker employed at a cotton field 8 miles east. He took in the sight before him, 2 men coated in dust, their clothes torn and hanging loose, faces drawn tight with exhaustion. In Spanish, Miguel asked if they needed help. Werner didn't understand the words, but he understood the concern. In English, he explained that they were German prisoners who had escaped from Camp Papago and desperately needed water. Miguel reached behind the seat and handed them a jug. Werner drank too fast, gulping until his stomach rebelled. Klaus drank slowly, carefully. When Miguel asked where they were headed, Werner answered honestly, Mexico. Miguel laughed, not cruelly but in disbelief. He told them Mexico was still more than 100 miles south. He explained that the desert ahead held no water this time of year. Men died out there, he said with disturbing regularity. Then he offered them a choice. He could drive them back to Camp Papago. Werner and Klaus stepped aside and argued in German. Klaus still wanted to push forward. Werner knew they wouldn't survive another day. After several minutes, Klaus relented. They climbed into the truck. Miguel drove them back to Camp Papago Park and dropped them at the front gate at 7:20 p.m. on December 17. Their escape had lasted 21 hours. The 3 men who carried the collapsible boat fared even worse. They reached the Salt River at dawn that same morning. Where their map showed a thick blue line, wide, navigable water, they found only sand and stone. The riverbed was not shallow. It was empty. One of them, Oberstfreiter Hans Schmidt, stared for a moment before bursting into laughter. He laughed until he had to sit down. When the others asked why, Hans explained what had finally dawned on him. The Americans had not faked the Grand Canyon. If they were willing to hand prisoners maps with rivers that vanished for half the year, there was no reason to invent landscapes. The canyon was real. Germany was losing a war to a country so vast that in some places water carved gorges a mile deep, and in others, entire rivers disappeared. They folded the boat and turned back. At 2:30 p.m. they surrendered. When the guards heard about the boat, they laughed and explained that Arizona rivers only flowed during the summer monsoon. The Salt River would not run again until July. Hans asked if the Grand Canyon was real. It was, the guard said. How deep? Hans asked. Over a mile in some places. Hans sat down and did not speak again that day. By December 20th, 19 of the 25 escapees had been recaptured. Most surrendered willingly once their water or food ran out. 2 were found unconscious from dehydration and taken to a civilian hospital. 6 remained free briefly. Wartenberg had gone the farthest. 67 miles south of Phoenix, a sheriff's deputy spotted him walking along a county road. When asked where he was going, Wartenberg answered, "Mexico." When asked if he had water, he admitted he did not. The deputy gave him a choice: ride back to Camp Papago or keep walking and likely die within a day. Wartenberg chose the car. He returned to the camp at 4:20 p.m. on December 21st. Werner Krauss had been back inside the wire for 3 days when he saw the Christmas menu. It was posted outside the mess hall on December 23rd. He stopped and read it once. Then again. Then a third time. Roast turkey. Mashed potatoes with gravy. Sweet potatoes with marshmallows. Green beans. Cranberry sauce. Fresh rolls with butter. Apple, pumpkin and pecan pie. Coffee with real cream and sugar. He searched for exaggeration. Was impossible quantities. But the portions matched what he'd been eating for 16 months. The ingredients matched items sold at the camp canteen. The menu was probably real. Werner showed it to Klaus. Klaus dismissed it as propaganda meant to punish escapees psychologically. Werner disagreed. He asked how propaganda could involve feeding nearly 4,000 prisoners full meals every day for a year and a half. Klaus had no answer. On Christmas Day, December 25th, dinner was served at 6 p.m. Paper snowflakes hung above the tables. A small Christmas tree glowed with lights. A record player filled the hall with American carols. Servers carried plates piled with real food. Werner ate slowly. The turkey was tender. The gravy was rich. The pie apple was warm and fragrant with cinnamon. It was different from what he remembered in Germany. Sweeter. Richer. But undeniably real. Around him, faces showed the same expression he felt inside: confusion, disbelief, and something close to grief. If America could afford generosity toward its enemies while fighting a war on 2 continents, then Germany had already lost. Not because of tactics, but because of abundance. Colonel William Holden, commander of Camp Papago, completed his investigation days later. The tunnel impressed even Army engineers, nearly 200 feet long, properly shored, ventilated, and hidden. Yet Holden understood the deeper failure. The escape had not been defeated by guards. It had been defeated by geography, and by the moment the prisoners realized that the world they had dismissed as propaganda was real. Some wars end with a signature on paper. Others end the moment a man finally understands what he is facing. For Werner Krauss, that moment did not come on a battlefield or in a prison cell, or even during his failed escape across the Arizona desert. It came at the edge of something so vast that it erased doubt itself. The Grand Canyon stretched for 277 miles, reached nearly 18 miles at its widest point, and plunged more than a mile into the earth. It lay 220 miles north of Phoenix, far beyond anything Werner had imagined while staring at photographs he once dismissed as American trickery. Colonel William Holden made an offer no one expected. He arranged for the escape participants to see the canyon in person. The trip took place on January 14, 1945. 23 of the 25 men agreed to go. 2 refused outright, insisting they would not waste time witnessing American propaganda with their own eyes. They traveled north in 2 army buses, escorted by 8 guards. The journey lasted 6 hours, passing through landscapes that grew colder and greener with every mile. At midday, the convoy stopped at a roadside diner in Flagstaff. For the first time since their capture, the prisoners were allowed to eat among civilians. Werner ordered a hamburger and a Coca-Cola. The hamburger was enormous: thick beef, fresh lettuce, tomatoes, onions, pickles, all pressed into a toasted bun. The Coca-Cola arrived in a glass bottle packed in ice. Werner ate slowly, deliberately, watching the room around him. American families filled the diner. A man at the next table cut into a steak that must have weighed 12 ounces. His children drank milkshakes without hesitation, laughing as if sugar and milk were ordinary things that could never run out. Werner had not seen a milkshake since before the war. No one stared at the prisoners. No one treated the meal as exceptional. The abundance was casual, unremarkable, almost invisible to those who lived inside it. At 3:40 in the afternoon, the buses reached the south rim of the Grand Canyon. The prisoners stepped out and walked toward the edge. Werner approached the rim and looked down. The canyon was real. Photographs had failed to capture its scale. The depth seemed impossible, an open wound in the earth that stretched beyond comprehension. Layers of red, orange, tan, white, and purple stones stacked like the pages of an ancient book. The Colorado River traced a thin, distant line more than a mile below. Shadows revealed countless side canyons branching endlessly outward. Werner did not move for 11 minutes. Beside him stood Klaus Becker, tears sliding quietly down his face. When Werner asked what was wrong, Klaus shook his head. "Nothing is wrong," he said. "I just understand now." He explained that Germany had not merely lost battles or territory. It had lost the war completely and permanently. A nation capable of preserving something like this, and allowing enemy prisoners to visit it for education, was not a nation Germany could defeat. Werner asked if Klaus still believed the Americans had created the canyon. Klaus laughed softly. "The canyon is natural," he said. "But choosing to protect it, to share it, that is not. Only a wealthy nation can afford to make such a choice." A short distance away, Jürgen Wartenberg stood silently, staring into the void. Colonel Holden approached and asked his opinion. Wartenberg admitted the canyon was extraordinary. Holden asked whether he still believed the photographs in the camp library had been fake. Wartenberg said no. What convinced him, he explained, was a sign near the rim describing the canyon's geological history, 1.8 billion years of rock carved by the Colorado River over 5 to 6 million years. No propaganda campaign, he said, would include timelines that challenged accepted historical understanding. The explanation was scientific, not political. The canyon was real. They returned to Camp Papago Park at 11:30 p.m. The guards expected the prisoners to be subdued or shaken. Instead, many seemed calm, almost relieved. Werner explained why. For 18 months, the prisoners had debated whether camp life represented genuine American abundance or an elaborate deception. The canyon answered that question. The food, the libraries, the music, the Christmas dinners, it was all real. America was exactly as powerful as it appeared. And accepting that truth meant accepting that the war was over. Camp Papago Park held German prisoners until May 1945. Repatriation took months. Werner returned to Hamburg on February 3, 1946, to a city in ruins. Entire neighborhoods lay flattened. Food was scarce. Heat was scarce. His first meal was watery soup, a few potatoes and a small piece of bread. As he ate, he thought of roast turkey, of apple pie, of hamburgers and Flagstaff. He settled in Cologne, working as a translator. His English, learned through American newspapers, magazines and films during captivity, opened doors. In 1948, he joined the American Occupation Authority as a liaison officer, helping German civilians navigate Reconstruction. He was effective because he understood Americans. He had spent 2 years studying them, convinced they were lying. Eventually he realized they were not. They simply lived from a baseline of abundance that Germans could scarcely imagine. In 1953, Werner immigrated to the United States. He returned to Phoenix. Camp Papago was gone, barracks demolished, fences erased. Only the desert remained unchanged. He visited the Grand Canyon again. It was exactly as he remembered. Werner became an engineer, married an American woman, raised 3 children, and became a U.S. citizen in 1958. He never returned to Germany. When asked about the war, he spoke of the tunnel, the escape, the dry rivers, the Christmas turkey, and the canyon. He said he learned more about America as a prisoner than he could have learned in decades of freedom. That abundance was not propaganda. That generosity was not weakness. That a nation could afford kindness because it had more than enough. Werner Krauss died in Phoenix on March 17, 1994. His obituary did not mention the escape. But at his funeral, one of his children told the story. Of a soldier who surrendered because he could not stop thinking about pie. Of a man who learned the Grand Canyon was real. Of a prisoner who became a citizen after discovering that the best parts of America were not illusions at all.